deepest bowels of your imagination.
Actually, he's from Canada there, bud.
From the famed Hotter Show Studios, this is The Hotter Show.
What is up, everybody? We're rolling audio here today on episode 92 of The Hotter Show. How are you? I hope you're doing fan-freaking-tastic. Thank you so much for tuning in, clicking that play button on today's episode of the podcast. Got a very cool episode for you today, guys. Earlier in the week there, I sat down and did a little Skype call interview with my man, Mr. Jacob Grondy from the Old 1-2 Pro Wrestling Podcast, former co-host of the Faster Than the World podcast and Peter and Jake Talk Wrestling. Really was a great conversation. It was my first time doing anything over Skype, legitimately doing anything over Skype anyway. And I think it went pretty darn well. I was really happy with the quality. The conversation was great. Jacob is just a great dude. Loves wrestling. He's been a lifelong wrestling fan. There's so much I learned about him and kind of his background in wrestling and that kind of thing. It was such a blast. This part here today, we basically just strictly talk wrestling. We don't really talk about much else. But that was kind of what I wanted for this part one here. So really hope you guys enjoy it. It's a great conversation. I do apologize in advance because there is some weird kind of audio intricacies and that kind of thing that do happen in the podcast. There's more than a couple times actually where it does skip. It skips like a split millisecond, just enough to kind of go, but it doesn't really take away from the conversation, I don't think, anyway. So I do apologize if it gets annoying, guys. We tried to edit out as much as we possibly could. That's what happens when you have crappy internet. But either way, I still think it's a great conversation. I really enjoyed having Jacob on the podcast. Definitely going to have him on again in the future. But it was a great conversation. Really talk about some cool stuff. I asked him some cool questions. We touch on kind of how he first got into wrestling, talk about his father, who actually was an independent wrestler. I didn't know that. Talk about his podcast, some of the people he's interviewed. We talk about whether he's what kind of an era he enjoys more, whether it was the Attitude Era or it was the kind of Ruthless Aggression Era, or whatever it is, classic wrestling and that kind of thing. Tons of stuff we talk about. Talk about whether or not he wanted to actually get into wrestling and what his gimmick would be. You also hear what my gimmick would have been, so I think it's pretty funny. It's a great podcast. Really enjoyed having Jacob on. I want to just roll right into the podcast here, guys. Don't take up any more time. Let's get into it. All right, so I'm currently being joined right now on the show by Jacob Grondy, who is the host of the Old 1-2 Pro Wrestling Podcast. You guys might also know him as one of the former co-hosts of the Faster Than the World podcast, as well as Peter and Jake Talk Wrestling. I've talked about him before on the show a bunch of times. Really enjoy his work at his podcast. I'm very excited to have him on the show. Jake, what's going on?
Nothing much. Just enjoying my Monday off. Excited for Raw tonight. Excited for Royal Rumble. I think was about 13 days?
Yeah, I think about 13 days now, the 29th.
Oh, yeah.
So it'll be very exciting. I'm looking forward to it, too. We're going to go to buddies and watch the whole thing, so it's going to be a good time. For
sure. Always a good time. I think Royal Rumble is by far my favorite pay-per-view. I just love the Royal Rumble match itself, and there's always at least one good title match. So, super excited.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the Royal Rumbles, it's definitely a favorite of mine as well. I mean, obviously, I think everyone loves WrestleMania, but I think Royal Rumble's always a good time, though, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And this year looks pretit good. I mean, they got a lot like Goldberg, Taker, Brock Lesnar. So it looks like they're really beefing up this year specifically.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when I saw the poster. They had all the big four guys out front: Cena, Taker, Lesnar, and Goldberg. And then you see little AJ Styles in the back, their world champion. Yeah. I thought that was kind of funny, but
yeah, I mean, but AJ tore it up this year. I mean, he was the first person ever to be on the Wrestle Kingdom 10, and then also be on WrestleMania, and leaves the year with the title. I would say AJ Styles, even though he has the little picture in the back of the poster, I think he's definitely my choice for Wrestler of the Year.
Oh, absolutely. He's mine as well. Like, I was a fan of AJ's work, up until he came right up to the WWE. I kind of lost touch with him when he was in Japan. But, once I kind of got into what he was doing again, and then I found out he was coming here, I mean, that was awesome, that Royal Rumble. I don't know how they're going to top that this year.
Oh, I guess we'll have to see. We'll have to watch.
Yeah, we'll have to watch, and maybe we'll have to hook up again and try and have a little review on it or something.
For sure.
Good time. Sure. But kind of getting into it, I have, like I said, I have a whole bunch of stuff I want to ask you. When exactly did you start getting into wrestling? What age were you, and what kind of started getting you into it?
Well, I've been into wrestling honestly my whole life. There's little videos of me playing with Ron Simmons action figures and Sting action figures when I could walk. My first memory, not even of wrestling, but of life, I can remember watching the TV when Lex Luger slammed Yokozuna that day when he came in on the helicopter and everything. I was watching it with my dad, and I think that's why I got so into it, is because my dad was an independent wrestler. All my uncles liked wrestling. They would always take me to shows and everything like that. So I was kind of like brought into it. Pro wrestling author John Hitchcock was my babysitter. I would watch matches with Bruce Mitchell from PW Torch at his apartment. I was just it's kind of weird to think about wrestling not being there, especially as a kid.
Wow, that's awesome. So you say your dad was an independent wrestler?
For sure. He wrestled a little bit with WCW. He did some job matches with Rick Steiner and Kevin Sullivan.
That's awesome.
Yeah, job to the Varsity Club. I remember going to matches, seeing him. He wrestled Doink when I was a kid. He wrestled Ken Shamrock when I was a kid. Tatanka a little bit.
That's awesome. It's a lost art. The call them job guys or whatever. I always try to refer to them as enhanced talent, but it's kind of been a lost art. A good guy who that's a real talent to me. Someone who can basically dedicate their career to helping get guys over. For sure. I mean, there's a lot of guys who can't find work in wrestling. So even if you're a job guy, that's the name. It's you have a job. You're exactly.
Right there.
You're in the ring, putting over guys, even like someone like a Tatanka or Ken Shamrock or Rick Steiner. I mean, just some of the guys you named. I mean, that's just even me in the ring with them. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was looking back, it was kind of weird, but people would always talk about like my dad could beat up your dad. I'd be like, well, my dad actually does beat up.
Yeah. They say, yeah, my dad actually does beat up people.
Yeah.
Well, right on. Well, that's awesome. I didn't. Have you ever talked about it on the show before? I know when you had Bruce on the first episode of the old one too. I really enjoyed that conversation. That was cool to kind of hear how you guys had that connection and. To hear how you guys used to watch matches and that kind of thing as well.
I try to just talk about maybe with the product that we're watching. So a lot of times, unless it comes up, I don't really want to bring that. My dad used to be a wrestler. My dad used to be a wrestler. But I'm looking to maybe as the old one too gets a little bit more of a following, maybe have him on, maybe review an old match of his, and then maybe some other things like that.
That would be awesome. I just think it's so cool if I'm not that good of a person. If my old man was an independent wrestler or something, I talk about it all the time. So you're much better than me.
I hear you.
But so I was gonna ask, what do you remember the first time you saw wrestling? But you touched on that the first time you remember with Lex Luger body slamming Yokozuna.
For sure, but I guess there's footage of me watching wrestling, but that's the first memory I have of it. How certain little kids would do animal sounds, like what does a dog say, what does a cat say? My parents taught me what does Ric Flair say? How do you dance like Rick Rude? What does Sting say?
That is awesome. So can you give me your best Ric Flair impersonation?
Oh, well, it starts and stops with the woo. I just have to let's go with just like woo. Is that good?
That's good. That's perfect.
I'm from North Carolina. I know it should be a little bit better than that.
Well, hey, that's better than mine. So you're doing okay. I think it's so cool. We kind of hooked up on Twitter months ago, and we've kind of just shot the breeze back and forth. And I didn't obviously I knew you were into wrestling, obviously, but I didn't know that kind of little backstory. So it's cool. I'm glad we were able to do this. So talking about kind of when you first got into it and that when you were younger and basically being brought up in a wrestling family, fans of wrestling and that kind of thing, as well as who was kind of your first initial favorite wrestler that you had when you were a kid?
Without a doubt, Sting. I guess the bright colors, the fact that all my uncles and everybody loved Ric Flair, and here was this guy who was good, who was taking on Ric Flair, taking on Vader and things like that. So he just represented something he spoke to me at the time. It just came out bright colors, never cheated, never did anything bad, rose above the odds. And then I could also talk shit to my uncles when he won. So
exactly. It's like, hey man, my guy beat your guy.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. Did just kind of touching on something, did your when you were younger, because I can remember the moment when I kind of realized, I was watching a wrestling match and I'm watching and I was 100% in. I'm like, yes, this is awesome. I love it. But it wasn't until I was much older that I kind of realized, hey, that punch didn't really connect. Did your dad ever have that chat with you or anything, or was it just kind of like sacred? You don't talk about it.
I think he let me believe up until the point where I think like kids at school were kind of saying like it's fake, and then I would kind of like stick up for it, like protect. Like I didn't know the term, but I was definitely protecting the business. Mm-hmm. And my dad was just like, it is fake. He just kind of like told me straight up, like he's just like this is how it is, but it's still fun. It's still exciting. Like, so I kind of learned, like, I guess early, but like when I was watching the matches, like I still believed. I was still like caught up in it, even though like it was told to me by an old former wrestler. Like, I still kind of believed. It was kind of an interesting thing. But right around like I would say like middle school, I started watching, and like you would kind of see like guys get hit with like hardcore matches and like using a sledgehammer. Things like that. I was like, okay, well, this guy's face would be, broken.
He'd be obliterated.
Yeah. So I think it was around middle school, around like 2001 type of thing. I would just see little things like maybe the worm, Sky Duhati's worm, kind of caught me off, smarted me up because no one would lay down for that long. Just little things like that. I kind of broke me in. Yeah,
when you're a kid and you kind of get broken into it, it's like, oh, I think I can remember. Especially when I was younger, I would do the same thing. I would defend it, and I would like lock kids in holds and that kind of thing who would talk crap about it. I mean, not saying you guys should do that or anything, but I just thought it was so interesting when we look back as kids and thinking like, man, like you'd have some people saying to me, I had buddies when I was younger, obviously that were into it, and now they're like, you're still into that fake shit, seriously? And it's like, no, like there's some things in the wrestling business that, speaking from just like a lifelong fan's perspective, there are some things that are definitely not fake in the wrestling business. If you the miles aren't fake, the body slams aren't fake, the time being away from your family and that kind of thing, none of that shit's fake.
For sure. I mean, even in the that UK Championship tournament that just happened over the weekend, I mean, guys are getting busted up. Guys were that was some. They were definitely working snug. Yeah, that was some brutal stuff. I just saw clips. My biggest issue, is the fact that I don't have the WWE network. I can't get it right now where I live. So I am heartbroken the fact that I have to watch all this wrestling after the fact. It is not fun. Oh, that sucks, man. I can't imagine. I mean, there's little ways around it if you dive into the internet long enough, Oh yeah, I've had a couple, live streams that were probably, let's say, not legal. Yeah, for sure. But you got to do what you got to do to watch some wrestling. But do you remember kind of the first full length match, like sitting here right now, the first full length match that you watched and you can kind of like really fully recollect? Was it the match you mentioned earlier with Yokozuna and? Lex Luger? Yeah, Lex Luger. I can't believe I'm already drawing a blank on that. But, that was just like a little segment, but that's right. Yeah, my memory of that era of wrestling is not the greatest because I watched all of it quite after the fact. But I do remember. I can picture the segment in my head right now. I would say, like, when I was a little younger, I remember Raw would start at 9:00, and my parents would say, like, if I got my homework done and everything, I could stay up and I could watch up to the 1-2-3 Kid match, because I was really into the 1-2-3 Kid at the time. Oh, yeah. And one time he wrestled Razor Ramon, and it was just an hour, and Raw was just an hour at that point, and it went the whole hour. So I think that match was probably one that I remember like fully watching, not just the pageantry, not the like the spectacle, but like really invested into like each offensive and defensive maneuver. Absolutely. That was when Kid went over, right? I think in that match. Oh yeah,
Was that Raw match? He did the moonsault spot to finish. He took the bag of money and took off.
Yes, sir. Yes, that was great. And also I would say another match that stands out in my brain. It was War Games from WCW Fall Brawl '96. It was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Is where like the NWO had the fake Sting.
Oh yeah, okay.
And WCW had like the real Sting, and I was there in attendance, and of course all my uncles were giving me shit saying Sting jumped NWO. I'm there with my number one, Sting finger, and then of course Sting comes out, takes down the NWO, but then feels betrayed by Ric Flair. WCW leaves, starts the Crow gimmick and everything. And 1, 2, 3 Kid and Sting were definitely my favorites growing up.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3 Kid. I think that's a guy who he is so overlooked sometimes, I think, by a lot of people who, when they think of that era and they think of even the Attitude Era, obviously when he changed over to X-Pac and that kind of thing, and even as Six, I think Sean Waltman, just as a performer, is a guy who's very underrated. I've always been a huge fan of his work. I got a buddy who does the podcast with me sometimes, and he's deliberately an asshole. We call him the heel, and he will always talk mad shit about Sean Waltman, but I mean he loves his matches. It's it's funny because he was always kind of a favorite of mine too back in the day.
Oh yeah, even especially like when he went back or when he went to WCW as Six, with his ladder match with Eddie Guerrero and everything. That stuff was really good, and like you said, very underrated. He I think maybe because he was the NWO light heavyweight and kind of maybe started getting maybe a little obnoxious toward the end with how he would come out and everything. People kind of, like you said, like overlooked how good he was in the ring, like bell to bell. I think he still holds up. I mean, he wrestled at King of Trios just this past year and tore it up. Absolutely.
He's a guy who still to this day can go just as good as he could, if not even better. I think just because now he's clean. And that's obviously not knocking him or anything, but just, now that he's clean in that, I see him kind of almost being more focused, and it's still cool to see. I would love to see him live at some point.
For sure, yeah. I guess, I might have seen him live as a kid, but I haven't seen him live it's been about 15 years, I guess. So I would be pretty interested. Another guy from that era, Billy Gunn, who's been surprising me a lot lately. He's in New Japan now, did the World Tag League tournament. And he's been really impressing me. I don't know how old he is. He's definitely over 40, but he looks in great shape, helping the young lions over there in New Japan. So that's another guy I think that's kind of overlooked.
He definitely is. I mean, he's a guy who it's funny. There's a quick story. We have near where I live here. There's this big fair that happens once a year, and the one year they had some pro wrestling at the fair, and I remember that was like. I think it was I was in grade 9 or grade 10, so I was like way into wrestling. At that point, I was convinced I was going to be a wrestler and so forth, but I'll talk about that in a minute. And I remember the big guy who they were selling the whole event with was Billy Gunn. And I remember going like, this is Billy Gunn, like, this is WWF guy, well, obviously WWE at the time, and I just remember freaking out, and I remember being there and seeing him come out like literally a ring that's in the middle of like a fairground and watching him work. And I mean, he was working like he was at Madison Square Garden. It was just, he was incredible. And afterwards I got the chance to talk to him for a little bit, and he was just the coolest dude in the world, So I have a lot of respect for Billy Gunn in that regard.
For sure, especially now that guys are smaller. He's definitely standing out with his size.
Absolutely. I can remember a match. I think it was a 6-man tag, and it was Billy Gunn, Albert, and I want to say Big Show. And I can't recall who they were against, but it was during the one Billy Gunn phase, and there was a spot. I can remember it was Big Show, Albert, and Billy Gunn, and they had all 3 of their guys up in like press slams. And I remember thinking like, oh yeah, Albert and Big Show, that's their everyday shit that they do. But then to see Billy Gunn hoist up a guy on the same level as Big Show and Albert kind of made me realize, like, holy crap, he's a big dude.
For sure, yeah. There's a lot of guys like that. I know Buff Bagwell's another one who is maybe overlooked. I mean, he did the Blockbuster. Now you see everyone doing the Blockbuster, like Seth Rollins. I know Cassius Ohno in NXT is doing the standing Blockbuster now. But I met him a while ago, and he was super cool dude as well. So yeah, there's I think there's must be something to maybe being overlooked that like humbles you a little bit to where you can still go, you can still learn and work into your 40s and 50s.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just tried to look it up, Billy Gunn's age, but I think he's in his late 40s, I want to say. But it's just still the fact that he can go. I mean, that's incredible. I haven't seen any of his work in Japan yet, but I'll definitely have to check it out.
For sure. He was on he did the Battle Royal for Wrestle Kingdom, and him and Michael Elgin went at it for a little bit, and they tore it up right there, right at the beginning of Wrestle Kingdom.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, all I've seen is the clips of the Kenny Omega match. I haven't even been able to watch that yet. I need to just set aside like a week to just watch wrestling and catch up, because I am way too far behind right now.
You definitely got to watch the Wrestle Kingdom. I know Okada and Kenny Omega are getting a lot of praise, which they should, but the whole like second half of that card is beyond phenomenal. Like Goto and Shibata had one of the best matches, I think, at least of the last few years, and that's just like not even talked about because the whole show is so good.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've heard good things about the show from all my wrestling buddies and that, and it's just a matter of having to sit down and watch it. But those New Japan guys, I mean, they go. Like that company is on fire.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, that's how you see all these ties with it. Like I know CMLL is working with them in Mexico, Ring of Honor, Revolution Pro in the UK. So it seems like, I mean, definitely they have a ways to go to get to what the WWE is at, and especially if they keep growing the way they're growing with the network. But it's a solid number 2 promotion in the world, and definitely a different product. A more like what we were saying is like hard hitting style, which I definitely enjoy. So if you're looking for more wrestling, definitely go toward New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Absolutely. I've always kind of been a fan of the kind of that, I guess, for lack of a better term, that kind of more strong style. Not necessarily stiff, but that strong style where you watch some of those Japanese guys go at it with each other, and you're just like, holy shit, does he owe him money or something? Like, damn. It's rough sometimes, because I've always been a fan of I'm the type of wrestling fan who I'll sit and watch, like if there's a little spot of chain wrestling, like some real good solid chain wrestling in a match, that's my like bread and butter. Like I love that. I love that stuff. Obviously I love a good story in that as well, but that's kind of always been more my forte, the moves and kind of the art of performing in the ring as a professional wrestler, the maneuvers, and obviously as entertainment.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people get swept up in the maybe the sports entertainment aspect of those kinds of stories, where like the McMahon family struggle and everything. They forget that like in the ring, there's still a story being told, like, and it goes beyond languages. Like if someone's been working the arm the whole match, and then he gets slammed on that arm, you then know that arm is out, and then that affects the rest of the match. There's still a little bit of story within every movement, I think, at least in a good match.
Absolutely. I know that when it was just kind of the funniest thing when AJ Styles first came in, I had real heat with him because he was using his calf crusher to finish off guys, but he wasn't working on the leg the entire match. I just obviously joking, but I used to just say I turn and say to my buddy like, he's exposing the business. What the hell? It's not working on the leg, but I think it's a lost art. I'll always say to guys sometimes just watching a match where they're working on a body part and you're feeling sympathy for whoever the opponent is, and that's really what you can tell a story that way. You don't need a whole bunch of high spots and crazy double backflip moonsaults. As much as I do like that kind of stuff, don't get me wrong. I've always been more a fan of that kind of storytelling. For sure. And
I was listening to a shoot interview a few months ago where they were talking to Matt Sydal, and he was talking about how there's like a gap with the passing of like Eddie and like Chris Benoit, and maybe like even like Edge retiring early and things like that, where there's like a generation of knowledge that's kind of gone, and I think that it's going to take some maybe like washing of tapes and like mixing and matching of international talent to like kind of bring it back and like get people to understand the psychology of it now. Because even with NXT and the Performance Center being what it is, they're still like producing guys. I'm not trying to knock them or knock anyone specifically, but like like a Baron Corbin, really, even after all that training, really, there's something missing there. There's something that he's not quite getting. I can't really put my finger on it, but I think if maybe they get like I know guys like Shawn Michaels are going back to the Performance Center. Edge is still working with the company. They need to really like get these guys into the Performance Center and teach them not just how to execute the moves, but psychology, because that is what brings people together. I mean, the best wrestlers that we know of as the best wrestlers, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Rock. I mean, they can't do 1,000 moves, but they can do the moves that can tell the story in the ring.
Exactly. That's all you need. Like even someone like a Baron Corbin. I mean, honestly, Corbin's one of my favorite guys. I couldn't tell you exactly why.
Yeah.
I think it's because he's just like, I know he's a heavy metal guy. He's got some cool shit he does, but I know exactly what you're saying by there's something missing. They were kind of throwing him in the world title picture, and I was like, whoa, back up. Like, he's not there yet. I think Stone Cold said it where he said, he's out there looking around waiting for someone to tell him what to do. And I think, that might even be the case. Even sometimes when he cuts a promo, it's like there's something in his personality that's missing. Kind of the route they've been going with him kind of just being more of just a blatant asshole.
Yeah.
I feel like they're getting there, but I think you're right where, he might need to take a step back and get someone like a Shawn Michaels to just kind of go, hey kid, here's what you're doing wrong. Here's how you do this. Here's how you win a crowd over. Here's how you, maybe give sympathy to a babyface or something, like kind of learn that stuff a little bit more than what he does know how to do.
Maybe that'll help. I think, but yeah, I definitely agree. Throwing him into the world title picture was way too quick. Because I mean, he had a match with the I forget his name, Kalisto, and then all of a sudden he's wrestling John Cena. Like there needs to be a little bit of a few more rungs on that ladder.
Yes. Did you see their last match, their last pay-per-view, the two of them had that hardcore match?
Kalisto and Corbin?
Yeah.
I missed it.
Okay, that was a good match. I know that a lot of people kind of don't hate on Corbin, but like he definitely has improved a lot, and you saw it in that match. Like they told a really good story in that match.
I'm definitely a fan of Kalisto. A lot of times his matches get like swept under the rug a little bit, but I thought he kind of had a good match against Alberto Del Rio a few months ago. And then even in the Ryback match at Rumble or at Mania, where people were coming into the seats and Ryback is always talking about how awful it was because no one was sitting down. I thought even with all the barriers they had to overcome, they still pulled off a great match. I think there's a lot you can tell with the dynamic in play with him being such a small, quick guy.
Absolutely, he brings that to the table where he'll go against a guy who maybe is a little bit more of a kind of a slower, lumbering guy, but he makes it work and he puts the work in. He's a tremendous talent. I'm hoping that they kind of keep giving him a little bit of a rub, but we'll have to see what happens. I'm hoping they don't just shove him down to the cruiserweights and call it a day because he's considering that they've built him up, giving him the U.S. title and that. I feel like they should kind of keep that momentum going with him.
Yeah, for sure. Have you been watching the cruiserweights?
A little bit. I've been. Like I said, because I try to everything that I try to catch, I have to watch kind of after the fact. So sometimes like links don't work and that kind of thing. But from what I've seen of the cruiserweights, I mean, obviously I saw the Cruiserweight Classic, and that was some of the best wrestling I've seen in years.
Oh yeah, that was great stuff.
And I know that the match between what did you think of the match? Just because we're talking about the cruiserweights, during the Cruiserweight Classics, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa had a classic match. What did you think of that match?
Oh, I thought it was amazing. I mean, they played a little bit into they were able to take the stories that they were using on NXT, like the injury and everything, and bring it to the Classic. I think that helped a lot with it. But those guys have been tearing it up in the Indies for years. They've always said they wanted one shot. They got that one. They got a shot, not necessarily their one shot, and they tore it up. I really enjoyed that match. I thought Mustafa Ali was really good in that tournament. Of course, Kota Ibushi. Cedric Alexander, I've been seeing him wrestle for years, being from North Carolina, and I thought he tore it up in that tournament. I really just enjoyed that whole tournament, top to bottom. Like I can't think of a bad match in that whole thing, in that whole show.
Yeah, that was a great tournament. That whole thing.
For sure, yeah. But I never heard of Mustafa Ali before that tournament, and seeing him wrestle for the first time, I feel like he was a surprise standout to me for sure.
He was great. There was a couple of guys that were just great. But kind of getting back into it, did you ever have a desire? Because I think at some point most wrestling fans, I mean, I know I did. Did you ever have kind of a desire to get in the ring and give it a shot, as far as like working and that kind of thing in the ring?
I think, yeah, I was when I was younger, when I was like maybe middle school and everything, I definitely thought I was just going to be a pro wrestler. Like, it wasn't like maybe one day or anything. I thought like that's what I know, it's what I've been focusing on. But because of that, I guess I got into sports and everything. I played basketball, ran track, and then kind of in high school I ran cross country and track seriously, kind of seriously. So but when I was like 18, 19, I was like, no, I'm just going to kind of stick with, running, kind of more of something I'm used to, something I've already competed in, instead of moving up. And plus, I'm kind of I'm not trying to take away from any cruiserweights, any people from 205 Live, but I am a bit of a smaller guy, so I knew it would be maybe harder to do.
It'd be trickier for someone who's like I said, like a smaller guy. Like, I know me personally, the second I took my first bump, I was out. I just said, "Oh, okay, this isn't as fun as it looks on TV."
Sometimes me and my dad would like mess around a little bit. He tossed me around, and I think he would one time threw me on try to press slam me on his bed, and he slammed me so hard I bounced up off the bed and then onto the floor. And I think maybe that might have knocked some sense into me.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you sold it.
Oh yeah. That was a little snug. He surprised me.
He was a little snug, yeah. But so back in like middle school and that, when you were a kid, did you kind of already have your first gimmick figured out and your name and your finish and all that already figured out?
Oh man. I definitely gravitated when I was really young. I definitely gravitated toward like paint your face and doing this thing. I think I had this gimmick called the Black Ninja, where I was pretty much just a ninja, but that was where I went. I don't really, yeah. It was kind of that was kind of it. I was a black ninja. I don't know.
The Black Ninja. That's a solid gimmick. I could hear that turning on WCW and see something like that. I'd be like, oh, cool, the Black Ninja, right on.
Yeah, like hiding in the shadows a little bit, coming out. Yeah, like definitely with chops and everything.
Hey, what the hell? That'd be cool.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Black Ninja.
Did you have a gimmick set up or anything like that?
I mean, of course, back in the day, because I actually got into wrestling mostly through video games at first, actually, to be honest with you. Parents watched it when I was younger and I remember it, but I played some video games of it when I was a kid. So obviously I was like, okay, well, I need a name. So I was like, I've always been the gimmick guy in the sense of I need like okay, here comes, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Here comes Greg the Hammer Valentine. I always was like, I need that kind of first name in front of my name. So when I heard the Hammer, I was like, yeah. When I was like, 8 years old, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be the Hammer.
Oh, I like it. The Hammer Hodder.
Yeah, the Hammer, TJ Hodder or whatever it was, and that was my gimmick. And I had the outfit done up and everything. It was crazy. It was not good.
Was the Hammer like in the Creative Pro of these video games?
Oh yeah, he was for a long time, and then I kind of retired the gimmick a little bit. I had to. It got to. It was too 90s, Then I was the Iceman, because
nice.
that was a nickname I was given in high school during the wrestling, kind of like the amateur wrestling thing we did for a little bit there. I was given the nickname kind of as a joke, and it just stuck. So nice, I had to change the gimmick, but my finish has always been the same though. I've always done the cutter.
Nice. That's a good go-to,
Yeah, that's always my finish. So did you have a finish picked out, or have you kind of always been a...
Oh, I think I was definitely coming off the top. I was definitely a kid who was jumping off of the bookshelves, off of my bed and everything, onto pillows and things like that, cutting the wind out of me. definitely was a big fan of Rey Mysterio, big fan of Jeff Hardy as I, progressed a little older. So definitely was jumping off a lot of bookshelves. So I think I would have to have gone to the top rope for my finisher.
Yeah, and then just anything off the top rope basically is solid.
Oh, yeah. Anything. Just maybe moonsault. I know Kidman at the time was killing it, so I probably would have done a shooting star.
That's always that's a solid top rope maneuver.
Yeah.
Shooting star press. The Black Ninja with a shooting star press. Like, I can see it. I can hear them calling it right now. It's just it's a done deal on that. All right, guys, let's say hypothetically here for a second that you have a business, you're in a band, you're a podcaster like me, you have a YouTube show, and you need some awesome new merch, business cards, logos, even maybe some t-shirts done up. Well, you need to look no further than my man, Mr. Jason Reese, over at Jaybird Digital Arts. Starting right now on this podcast today, Jason is offering a special 10% off discount just for listeners of The Harder Show when you mention The Harder Show upon contacting him. But what exactly does he do? Well, Jason does t-shirts, posters, album design, tickets, photo manipulation. You guys still with me? Advertising, business stationery, mailers, brochures, fine art, and anything else you can imagine, Jaybird Digital Arts can create it. Jason has done all of the t-shirts, logos, banners, and all social media stuff for both The Harder Show and for Harder Guitar Services, so I can promise that you will love and be inspired by what Jason comes up with. You can contact him on the web at www.jaybird, that's Jaybird, digitalarts.com, or you can search for him on Facebook and Instagram under the Jaybird Digital Arts handle. Search hashtag Jaybird Digital Arts for a look at all of his awesome and unique work. So you watched a little bit of WCW and that kind of thing back in the day. What was kind of your go-to show when you first started kind of like really getting into wrestling and that kind of thing? What was your go-to show? Oh,
well, I mean, I would always watch Monday Night Nitro and then kind of like maybe during commercials watch Raw. So as a kid, I was definitely, WCW. When they first started doing like the NWO thing, and of course when Sting came out, but definitely flipping back and forth, still keeping up with Raw. But then kind of when The Rock became the corporate champion over around like 98, I was slowly switching over to WWE, and then by the time like 99, 2000, I was barely watching WCW. I was watching all Monday Night Raw. So there was like a little switch, much like the ratings. Like if you've seen Monday Night Wars, that's kind of how my viewership happened. Like I watched WCW, and then WWF started slowly getting better and better with like Stone Cold and McMahon and Stone Cold and The Rock. And then of course the guys were just jumping over left and right, like Chris Jericho left, and eventually like Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Saturn, Dean Malenko all just jumped over at once, and that's when I kind of just gave up on WCW, sadly enough. Yeah, once kind of that, I would always hear guys talk about, because unfortunately, back in the 1990s and 2000s, kind of that era, I was like 7, so I don't have the greatest recollection of it, but I would always hear guys talk about how they tune in to, like, say, the first little bit of Nitro to watch guys you mentioned, like Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, kind of that cruiserweight division, and the luchadors do their thing. And then once you got into the main event, kind of they switch it over to WWF, because the the kind of that mid card was so much better than WWF's mid card back in that time period. Oh yeah, totally. I mean, Monday Night Nitro started at 8, and I remember Raw didn't start till 9. So all the good stuff, like you'd see like Lucha 6-man tags, like Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero. I mean, even like older like WCW stars, like I remember like Mr. Wonderful wrestling a lot. Paul Orndorff wrestling a lot in the first hour and stuff like that. So it was definitely the show to watch. But then as it went on, it kind of drug, and they had a great idea with the NWO, but they really didn't know how to capitalize on it. Like WCW never really beat the NWO. Like the NWO got all convoluted, split up, joined back together again, and then kind of dismantled. So as a WCW fan, you got shown like right in front of your face why WCW wasn't good. Exactly. It was that, the NWO beats everybody. And I think not Goldberg. I think Kevin Nash said it best. He said, once you beat everybody, someone like ending Goldberg's streak. Once that happened, well, now Goldberg's just like everybody else.
So, and once you're like everybody else, once everyone joined the NWO, everyone might as well just go home because you're all the same. But at the same time, that's what happens when, Kevin Nash has the book for most of his career in WCW. It's just what happens sometimes.
For sure. I mean, you don't give the inmates the keys to the asylum.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure that's a quote. I'm obsessed with watching Kevin Nash shoot interviews and stuff. I have no idea why. I just love listening to Kevin Nash talk.
Sure.
And I'm pretty sure he said that quote, like, they gave the inmates the keys to the asylum, and how was it? Like, just done. But talking about like kind of that era of wrestling, have you kind of had a favorite era as far as kind of the golden age? They all have different terms. The golden age, like the Attitude Era, kind of the Ruthless Aggression Era, and then I guess I know Triple H said the Reality Era once in an interview, and I was like, oh God. But kind of the more modern era.
He said it, yeah. Notice he said it once. I'm sure a lot of people who kind of put a stop to that.
Yeah, I was like, no, not the Reality Era. Anything but that. Like, it's, I get where he's come from, but for the love of God, no. Just don't do it.
But as far as, I definitely love the Attitude Era like everyone else. So, like, I'm a sucker for anybody who was wrestling in WCW from, like, 96 to 98, WWE from, like, 98 to 2000. But toward high school, I started getting like tapes or DVDs from my uncles and everything with Ring of Honor and stuff. So I would say like I was watching it in 2004 and 2005, but like 2002 to like 2007 Ring of Honor stuff really stands out in my mind. I really enjoy that stuff. It was the first taste of like the indies that I could just watch and kind of. It wasn't week to week. It was like just. But that was kind of the fun of it. Was like hunting down these DVDs, like learning who had them, like who I could get them from. And finding out about like CM Punk, Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Colt Cabana.
Yeah, all those guys, like the good indie wrestling, not like, with all due respect to, Bob's Wrestling,
Sure.
the good indies,
Yeah, and then that era really stands out to me. So that's why I got Ricky Reyes on my podcast. I know that he's in Lucha Underground now, but I really wanted to ask him about what it was like in Ring of Honor, because that was when like ECW went under, WCW went under, so there was just like this void, and TNA had yet to start because Ring of Honor started a little bit before TNA. So there's this void. So literally all top indie talent like would just flood into this one promotion, and it was definitely didn't have a lot of production value behind it, but it was some of the best wrestling. I'll still to this day it has a great spot in my heart.
Exactly, and that was kind of the great thing about indies like Ring of Honor and that, like where they don't pay as much attention to, they don't have the budget of WWE. So like, hey, we can't compete with WWE in that regard. So what can we do to compete with them? Well, we've got this amazing in-ring talent. Let's just showcase that.
For sure.
But kind of touching on the Attitude Era real quick here, were you an Austin guy or a Rock guy?
Oh, I was definitely an Austin guy. For some reason, I've always been maybe questioned authority, like a little bit of a troublemaker in school, like kind of gravitated toward like punk rock and everything. So this one guy that would just beat his boss's ass was just awesome to me. So
you were walking around back in the day, flipping your teachers off and giving them stunners?
Maybe I wasn't that ballsy, but I was definitely daydreaming about doing stuff like that for sure.
Oh, well, I think we all would daydream about it once in a while. Would you say that there's been talks before of someone like a Chris Jericho who has, blatantly said before that he thinks that in some regards, as great as the Attitude Era was, there were parts of it that were kind of overrated as a whole. Would you say there's any truth to that as far as, like, say, gimmicks like Meat and PMS, for example?
I think those definitely didn't stand the test of time, but definitely for that time, I think they needed to be done. And, like, there needed to be something like pushing, because like the internet wasn't as big; it was cable TV. So, like, to push, like there were boundaries set. So, like there was someone literally their job was to censor the things that happened on TV. So if you could like push those boundaries, it felt edgy. But like now, I feel like with the internet out, where there's not a real edge to anything. You could really probably watch whatever the hell, like the weird, creepy, violent stuff you want. So to act like something's edgy now is kind of just comes across cheesy. So I feel like the stuff they were doing then was definitely for that time, but and shouldn't be redone. So I definitely understand what he's saying. But it was good for the time. It worked for the time. I can't really. It's hard to take it once you take it out of that time period. It falls apart.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Like I think that's more what he was touching on. Like people regard the Attitude Era being like the best era in all of wrestling, but then he says, "Well, hang on a minute. Like you want me going to the ring having a fight with the big boss man, and he's PMS put a pill in his water that gave him a boner." Yeah, and then the whole match he's fighting with a boner, and then Boss Man hits him with his nightstick in it to end the match. Like, come on, guys. Like, it's. But that's a small part of the Attitude Era. But I always think that's funny. The fact that someone who was such a big part of the Attitude Era kind of not talk down to it, but just he's kind of like, really, guys, like you really want to go back to that,
I can see how it's frustrating for someone like him, especially because he lived it. It was and he was in WCW, so it was a pretty frustrating time for him. And then of course he jumped over, but. That was 20 years ago. So for the last 20 years, he's been trying to show up this thing that in his mind really wasn't that good in the first place. So I can see how maybe the modern wrestler is going to kind of look down on the Attitude Era because the things they're doing now athletically are trumping it. And even when they want to go back, like they talk about going back to this older style, they're going way back to like Lou Thez kind of style. So I think. Maybe the storylines of the Attitude Era aren't going to be looked at as fondly as some of the characters maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you personally like to see kind of WWE go back to a more, not like an Attitude Era, but like kind of like a TV 14 style programming?
I want them to go back to more of where it doesn't look like like maybe a concert where it feels more like a sport.
Exactly.
I think that's what's going to bring people in. I think, and if it's a sport like football, I feel like football is maybe pretty violent. Like maybe MMA is that would be TV 14. So they could do something like that, but like with the acrobatics and things like that, like gymnastics or like maybe even a basketball, that could be PG or even like G-rated stuff. So I think there's just too much emphasis put on the rating. I feel like a good story is a good story. But what's going to bring people in is that live, even though it is predetermined, but giving it the big fight feel that sports, like a Final Four of the NCAA tournament, Super Bowl, like a championship match is held to like I have to get to this event and not a TV show.
A show, exactly. Like if you're looking at it from the standpoint of something like kind of how the Cruiserweight Classic felt. Where it was like the way they were presented, it was almost more presented as a sporting event than as like a show.
Sure, yeah, like giving stats about like height discrepancies, weight discrepancies, how long someone's been in it is gonna sweep someone in just as much or even more, I would say, than finding out like, oh, he kissed his girlfriend backstage. Like that stuff is like what people kind of mock about wrestling, but people don't really, even though they know it's predetermined, fake, whatever. I think if you have the announcer saying this guy is a little bit taller, his reach is a little longer, and then you have the ref check their boots and everything, like little things like that don't have to be spoken about, but it's like the details of like, oh, the ref is there to check the boots, so that puts it subconsciously in your head that's why the ref is there. So I think they could just go back to doing little details like that, and that will slowly bring people in and not feel like they're getting made fun of by the people who are putting it together.
Exactly. Like kind of even just doing like a tail of tape. I used to love when they would do that in big matches. Here's the Undertaker's reach on Brock Lesnar, but Brock Lesnar has the weight advantage, but Taker has this, and it's like they used to do that, and it was always so cool to see.
For sure. I thought that back in the UK tournament, too. That was
did
nice.
they? Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. See, I feel like slowly, Triple H is kind of wanting to go that route. I can sense it just seeing all this stuff that he's doing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future, where the product is going to go. But Has there ever been a moment as a wrestling fan that you can kind of recall that legit gave you goosebumps or like made you cry because it was such, even if it was a sad moment in the ring or whatever, something that was just so overwhelmingly emotional that happened? Obviously, aside from the obvious, like someone passing away or something.
I would definitely say WrestleMania 30. Like I mentioned earlier, when Ring of Honor was definitely that the time period when Bryan Danielson or Daniel Bryan was coming up. It was kind of like I strangely just like followed his career from like Ring of Honor to the little NXT little stint he had, and then just, I mean, him getting cheered and cheered and cheered is like validating like the style of wrestling I like, the things that I like about wrestling, and to have him beat like Triple H, Batista, Randy Orton, that would just, I mean, that storyline definitely spoke to me as a fan for sure. WrestleMania 30, my favorite WrestleMania because of just that one show-long storyline they had.
Absolutely. That was an amazing moment, having Daniel Bryan, holding up those titles at the end of that WrestleMania. That was just, that was incredible.
Even hugging Connor at the end there, that's definitely tearjerker type stuff. Oh,
yeah. That whole thing was just, that breaks my heart even still whenever I see that clip of it, because it'll get shared on Facebook every once in a while, and I'm like, no, I can't relive that. Like,
I've watched that one time. I've recommended it a bunch, but I've only watched it like once or twice.
Yeah, that's something that, if for anyone who talks crap about the wrestling business or whatever, like that's something that they can do for a kid like Connor, that they can never, that can never be taken away from Daniel Bryan either. The fact that he, made that kid, he made him so happy just to be there, and he went and hugged him and thanked him for helping him do, like, that was just incredible. That was that was why I was so sad when he had to retire earlier last year.
Yeah, that was pretty awful. And I heard a lot of things like how people were trying to like say, well, if he left the WWE, he would still be able to wrestle. But I mean, seeing guys, even like Kurt Angle, like sometimes I heard has to be in a wheelchair through airports and things like that now. So it's sad, but definitely something that needs to be done. A lot of wrestlers are, even though I enjoy the spectacle of seeing a really old wrestler, an old timer get out there, a legend get out there, but at the same time, it's better to be an able-bodied person and not necessarily a good wrestler at times.
Absolutely. Like I always talk about it, like safety in wrestling, so to speak, and having a performer who's amazing at what they do in this, but they're also like, they're safe, they're not going to hurt anybody, and knowing when it's time to kind of hang it up. Someone like a Daniel Bryan, who he could easily leave the WWE and go somewhere else and work, but he's choosing to not do that. He's choosing to be healthy and for his family and that. And I think that's a very courageous and honorable thing that he did. Obviously, his retirement speech, that was like, that was insane for me. What got me with that whole thing, I did a podcast on it, like, I think it was like episode like 5. I did on it. What got me was, everyone was, I was crying the whole time, but what got me was when he was hugging all the commentators, and he goes to Michael Cole and he hugs Michael Cole, and all I hear is Michael Cole kind of say off away from his microphone, and he's just like, I love you, kid. And I just started, I don't know why, I just started bawling my eyes out. I was like, Michael Cole.
It's funny that Michael Cole is the one that does it to you, man. Sometimes his commentary can bring me to tears in a completely different way.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. That's why I thought it was so funny, the fact that Michael Cole was kind of the tearjerker for me. I was like, really? Out of everybody. But I digress. But kind of speaking of people retiring, and obviously like when someone passes away or whatever, it's a tragic thing. And obviously as we sit here, yesterday it was became publicly known that WWE Hall of Famer Jimmy Superfly Snuka passed away. It's kind of tragic how that whole thing went. Obviously he had a lengthy battle with health issues and that kind of thing. He had just had his the murder charges dropped against him and everything. Regardless of what happened in his personal life or whatever, I'm not one to speculate on that kind of shit, but given that you've been like a lifelong wrestling fan in that, do you have any recollections of kind kind of just of Jimmy Snuka and of seeing footage of him over the years, like, you know, the time when he came off the cage, that famous footage that you see all the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely. I'm a little too young to remember him actually at his heyday, but I mean, YouTube is great for stuff like that. And when I was growing up, you would just hear all these wrestlers talk about it, like that's the reason they started. I mean, Mick Foley gives a lot of credit to why he got into the ring to Jimmy Superfly Snuka, and I definitely love Mick Foley and all the stuff he's done over the years. So, I mean, just the trickle down effect of what Jimmy Superfly Snuka did definitely is. I saw that growing up and even now, so it's pretty awesome to see. I mean, he's had a few sons and daughters in the WWE and stuff. I hope they're doing all right with the news and everything. But yeah, that's a sad loss.
Absolutely, he's a guy who, you know, like you touched on, like obviously we were too young to see him in his heyday, but even when he came back at I can't remember the WrestleMania, but he came back and had a match with Jericho. It's him, Roddy Piper, and Steamboat, and they had that little. Even though I think Jimmy Snuka came in and literally wrestled for 5 seconds and did a splash or something, you know, it was just cool to see the fact that he was this legendary guy who, you know, I've seen that footage 100 times of him coming off the cage, you know, and him cutting his crazy promos that made absolutely no freaking sense at all. It's just funny, a guy who, you know, we've kind of seen. I guess, like you said, you got the kind of the trickle down effect to guys like Mick Foley and that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely a bad, like a loss for sure. But it's good that these wrestlers nowadays are passing away at an older age instead of a very younger age because of drug use and things like that. So it's definitely says a lot that these wrestlers are passing away now at an older age, which is pretty good. It's good for the business as a whole.
Absolutely, can 100% agree with that. Kind of touching on that too. You were watching wrestling around like they say 2005 regularly, right? That was.
Yeah, for sure, totally.
So do you remember, the reason I'm bringing this up is because like I can remember this vividly. I've never really talked about this on the podcast, but do you remember when Eddie Guerrero passed away?
I remember hearing my dad told me. I remember my dad told me that he had a heart attack and little things like that. I remember that Raw where they were all out there, and it wasn't like today where they've kind of watered down when they all come out to the top of the ramp, but. Back then, it was like a big deal. It was something like a death. Like I think the last time I remember it happening was when Owen Hart passed away.
Yeah.
So I remember everyone at the ramp, and I just remember hearing just like the stories, the testimonials they did for Raw that night.
Yeah, it was really just a thing. You know, the tolling of the bell 10 times. It's such a sacred thing in the business. All the testimonials and that. I mean, I can remember the hardest two for me was the one. I mean, obviously Ray's was heartfelt and beautiful, but I'm a huge Dean Malenko fan, and hearing Dean Malenko talk about him, and hearing Benoit and seeing Benoit talking about him on air, just openly weeping at the end of it was just just brutal. Something that I mean, obviously, I think we can both agree Eddie Guerrero was definitely one of the greatest who ever stepped in the ring.
Sure.
And it's just funny how when something like this happens, you know, like I'm sure, you know, the next little while, everyone's going to be like, oh, Jimmy Snuka, like, everyone's going to be talking about him now for a while, but it's just how when things like that happen, it can go one of two ways. Either someone kind of gets forgotten or someone gets remembered in such a high regard. But kind of a controversial thing I wanted to ask your opinion on, because it's something that I think most wrestling fans have an opinion on. Mentioning his name just a couple seconds ago, Chris Benoit. Obviously, understandably, he's a name that's kind of been stricken from history. Obviously, in no way, shape, or form I ever, you know, put over the horrific and disgusting thing that he did, and that's its own conversation. But as a wrestling fan, were you a fan of Chris Benoit?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of like we were saying of WCW when he won the world title and everything, but I definitely remember when I was watching, when I would go back and watch Monday Night Nitro and things like that. He was definitely the main reason I was flipping back. Yeah, going back even to talk about Jimmy Superfly Snuka jumping off the top of the cage. I remember when he won the world title. That's how he won it. Chris Benoit jumping off the top of the cage to win the WCW title. He did drop it to jump to WWF like a week later, but huge Chris Benoit fan when he was with the Four Horsemen, him, Pillman, Arn Anderson, and Flair. Amazing stuff. And then all the way to WrestleMania 20 when he had the belt and everything. I just remember just his style, how he was always definitely not the biggest, but he was definitely going to go the hardest. Amazing talent in the ring. But with that said, I do think it's the right thing for the company to do to erase him from records.
Absolutely, yeah. That's more what I was going to ask. Is just I know some people have very controversial views on it. I think me personally, I've said before, is there a way to kind of give the wrestler Chris Benoit, a kind of a nod without kind of bringing him in, like inducting, like say, the Radicals or something, but then you can't leave Chris Benoit out. You induct him under a name in Japan, but then everyone know who it is. It's a hard thing for me, as I was such a huge Chris Benoit fan when that whole thing went down. I can remember literally watching that Raw, and that Raw was just so it was just awful. But I kind of wanted to ask you on that. But on the topic of people who have kind of been, I guess in a way, stricken from the record and blacklisted, do you think this whole thing that happened with Hulk Hogan last year, do you think it was maybe a bit, not of an over-exaggeration? I mean, he said what he said, but do you think, he should be allowed on WWE television again at any point?
I mean, I think maybe he should be allowed, but I think it kind of happened at a time, unfortunately, where he can't wrestle in the ring anymore. So for him to say controversial statements or just insulting statements like that, it kind of came at a time where I think it kind of ruined his career, because you can only really use him as a spokesman, but there's definitely spokesmen who don't have that blemish on their record. So I think unfortunately, can you bring him back? Sure, but why would you want to, especially when you have guys. You have tons of legends that don't have anything like that on their record.
It's sad for Hogan, obviously, the fact that he is Hulk Hogan, but how these events unfold, and I completely agree with you saying that you bring him back as a spokesman for the company, and then someone's watching this go, yeah, well, he's a racist. Why would I watch your company?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as far as the WWE, I mean, this WrestleMania will show how they feel about him, because it's in Orlando. He has a lot of local businesses, I know, in the Tampa, Orlando's areas and everything like that. So if they don't bring him back this year, I can't see him coming back for a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But kind of getting ready to wrap it up here for part one. Who's kind of some of your you touched on a few guys before, but right now in the company, who's some of your favorite guys to watch right now?
Oh, I definitely like Luke Harper right now. He's one of my favorites. I mean, we've already mentioned AJ Styles, of course. I like Rusev on Raw. I like, on the mic, I definitely like Enzo. I'm really into Cedric Alexander. Fun to watch because I've been seeing them wrestle around the Carolinas for a while. And then in NXT, Samoa Joe and Nakamura, those are probably some of my two favorite wrestlers to watch ever, and they're wrestling each other weekly on NXT. So I definitely have to give a shout out to those guys as well.
Absolutely. It's some great stuff. So you're still watching NXT regularly then?
Definitely not on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock, but I definitely try to catch it before the next one airs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's with me, obviously can't watch it as regularly, but whenever you get the chance to catch up on it, it's some great stuff. I'm excited to see what happens with Nakamura. I'm hoping.
I'm kind of upset they jumped up to 2 hours, though. I like the 1 hour block.
Yeah, I did as well. Raw, Raw making that big move to 3 hours was a lot for me. It's rare that I'll sit down, even if I have the opportunity to watch Raw straight for 3 hours. It's like, holy crap. I'm a SmackDown guy personally, but with the Royal Rumble coming up, we kind of did talk very, very briefly about it earlier. But do you have any kind of quick predictions of someone you'd like to see win or anything like that?
I think, like to see win. I think it'd be cool if, I mentioned earlier, like, I think Rusev has been killing it, so I think I don't think this is going to happen, but it would be cool if Rusev got a big push like that. I think he's a great heel. I think they were doing a lot of stuff with him with Cena a few years ago, but as his character has, I think, increased and his work rate has increased, he's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. So I would say Rusev, but as far as a prediction, I think the Undertaker is going to take it.
Yeah, you think he's going to win and then go for? Is he going to go for the Universal or the World? You think?
I think he's going to go for the World. I think him and Cena are gonna. That's going to be the marquee.
Yeah, that would be a. People can say whatever the hell they want on Cena. I'm not saying to sit here and say I'm a massive, massive John Cena fan, but at the end of the day, Cena versus Taker, yeah, that's a license to print money.
Oh yeah,
that'd be a match I'd be watching live if given the opportunity.
Yeah, that's something that when the common person will see that on a billboard and remember the Attitude Era, know who John Cena is for Saturday Night Live and the ESPYs and stuff, and even if they're not a wrestling fan, could recognize that is somewhat of a big deal.
Yeah, that's a huge match. Should be interesting to see what happens. I know there's been so much stuff floating around online about how that's not going to be the match and blah, 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 but it'll be interesting to see what happens for sure this Royal Rumble. It's going to be a great event.
Oh yeah. I think the two matches they're shooting for this year, it's Goldberg and Brock are going to somehow eliminate each other. That's going to be a match, and then Cena Taker, and then I think that's going to sell out the stadium. You could pretty much have Divas matches down the card after that,
and it wouldn't even matter. All the other unfortunately, with a card like that, I feel bad for whoever has to go on before those matches because they're going to get lost in the shuffle for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the bad thing about Mania is there's always one or two guys that you want to see more of and know that they could do more things with, but there's only so many spots on the card.
All right, gang, so that was part one of my conversation with Jacob Grondy from the Old 1-2 Pro Wrestling Podcast. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. Had so much fun having Jacob on. I know he had a good time too, so definitely going to have him on again in the future. Be sure to check him out on Twitter at JG Pro Wrestling, and of course check him out on the SoundCloud as well. Hopefully be doing some more stuff with him in the future. I might be honored to make an appearance on the Old 1-2 Pro Wrestling Podcast. So that'd be a lot of fun. Part 2, which is going to be coming up on Sunday here, a little bit shorter than part 1, but we go into all about podcasting and that kind of thing. So that's definitely a very interesting conversation. I love talking podcasting stuff now. It's basically my favorite thing in the world to talk about now. As much as I love talking about wrestling and music and that kind of thing, I love talking podcast gear and that kind of thing. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. If you're listening on the SoundCloud, be sure to follow the Harder Show on SoundCloud. Keep up with everything that goes on. Leave a like and comment away on this particular track. If you're listening on the YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the Harder Show on YouTube. Keep up with everything that goes on, any update videos like the one I posted Monday night, any Harder Plays stuff that I'm probably going to hopefully post some more stuff coming up soon, and all the podcasts on there. Be sure to leave a like or dislike on each video. Let me know what you think of it in the comments section below. And of course, if you're listening on the iTunes, be sure to subscribe to the Hardo Show to keep up with everything that goes on the iTunes. Once you subscribe to the iTunes, you don't even have to think about it. Every single episode will be downloaded to the device of your choosing once you sign it up for that particular option. And while you're on the iTunes, maybe leave the Hardo Show a little rating, I'd really appreciate that. Those ratings go a long way. I appreciate all the support, guys. As always, thank you all so much. And I will catch you guys next time on the Hardo Show. Take it easy.